morning, everybody. As you've heard, our session in the morning has changed a little bit. And today, this session will be split into two parts. The first part will involve microtalks. I've learned a new word today, microtalks. Yes, and it will be convened or coordinated by Jill Cousins. And then this session will run up to 10 minutes past 10. After that, I will invite Dr. Prabhuda Ganguly for another session on delocalizing knowledge. So we'll start with the first session, and I'd like to introduce Jill Cousins, who will be the coordinator for this session. Jill Cousins is the Executive Director of Europeana Foundation, building up Europeana from a project idea to an operational service. She has many years' experience in web publishing. Her past experience includes the commercial publishing world as European Business Development Director of VNU, New Media, and scholarly publishing with Blackwell Publishing, running with the online journal service. Prior to publishing, she had a variety of marketing and research careers in the information field, diverging from academic career in historical cartography and a PhD in 16th century Arabic and Turkish sea charts. Ladies and gentlemen, let me take this opportunity to invite Jill Cousins to... Yeah, please. Can you come on stage?
Well, actually, I wondered if you could introduce the next speaker, because we will start with him and then roll it. Is that okay? Do you have? So the next speaker is Professor
Chakraborty. Yes.
Lost.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I'll roll it from there.
Okay, no problem.
Or do I be introduced?
He's going to introduce you. Yeah. Is that okay? Sorry, this is all a bit...
okay, I'll introduce all of them. Professor Chakraborty, who will participate in these micro talks, is the first Kabiguru Rabindranath Tagore, I'm sorry for the pronunciation, distinguished professor in the humanities at Presidency University, Kolkata. He has been professor of English, Jadavpur University, between 1985 to 2015, Director General, National Library, Kolkata, 2010 to 2013, and Secretary and Curator of the Victoria Memorial Hall, 2012 to 2013. Educated at Presidency College, Jadavpur University and Oxford University, Professor Chakraborty had held visiting assignments at the University Malaya, the University of Alabama, and the University of London. He was one of the contributory editors of Gary Taylor and John Lavagnino. The collected works of Thomas Middleton, published by Oxford and Clarendon Press, which was awarded the Distinguished Scholarly Edition Prize by the Modern Language Association of America in 2009, and Elizabeth Dyer's Memorial Prize by Rice University. He has so many accolades, I would not like to mention all of them. But let me also introduce Enno Meijers, who works as an information manager at the Koninklijke Bibliotheek, National Library of the Netherlands. Sorry for the pronunciation again. His main focus is metadata management and discovery services. For the past years, he has been working on the development of a new cross-domain discovery infrastructure for the heritage collections. Earlier, he has been responsible for the development of the National Library Catalog platform, and he is one of the founders of the Dutch Dipedia chapter, and currently a member of the Dipedia Association board. He studied electrical engineering and business informatics and has been working for libraries for the past 18 years. Dr. Paul Nieuwenhuizen is a professor.
He's not going to make it, sorry.
He's not there?
Yeah.
Okay, so Please,
We've
Jill.
made your job really difficult, haven't we?
Yes. Actually, because they had already been introduced earlier.
Yeah.
Please, can you take the stage? Yes.
So, while Professor Chakraborty goes up, I really want to thank him because he stepped in at the last minute to give some context for this talk as far as India is concerned. So this is very much about opening up your collections and the frameworks that are needed to do it. We're going to start with Professor Chakraborty, and then we're going to have a look at what are open licenses, the frameworks around it. Then I've got 3 case studies, one of which is been very kindly stepped in by Enno Meijers. So he will give us what is happening in the National Library of the Netherlands in terms of opening up their material and why they have done it. And then I've got a couple of others from museums. We were going to have Paul, but he unfortunately is sick this morning. So thank you to everybody, particularly Professor Chakraborty, who has stepped in very much at the last minute to do this.
Thank you very much. It's rather ironic. Lawrence Liang was supposed to speak this morning, and I met Lawrence in 2005 at the CSDS, that is the Center for the Study of Developing Societies. And the occasion was precisely this. The Creative Commons, the trespassing public, and the public record of the proceedings is still available in the archive. It's called Sarai Archive, S-A-R-A-I. You can Google the Sarai. And the same subject is being discussed 12 years on. And let's see where we are at the moment. The record is called Contested Commons, not Creative Commons. We although discussed Creative Commons. In that deliberation, I remember, you'll have to excuse me, I just have a little phone, I don't have a laptop here. John Frau, I remember, claimed that the commons in information has been the major force of new property rights in the world order, as it was then, 12 years back, degraded through a range of international institutions and treaties. The new world order unequally distributed immaterial property rights. He expressed concern about the increasing privatization of the public domain. He cited the intellectual property laws bequeathed to Iraq by Paul Bremer. At that point of time, it was a recent event. The retiring administrator of the Coalition Provisional Authority before the transfer of sovereignty in June 2004. This legislation amended Iraq's original IP law of 1970. Amongst other changes to legislation governing patents, industrial design and industrial circuits, changes were introduced to Iraq's plant variety law, which had previously prohibited the private ownership of biological resources. These changes make the saving and exchange of seed by and between farmers illegal whenever that seed is a protected variety. Worries were expressed that one could discuss biopiracy, the TRIPS agreement, and legislative protection for traditional knowledge, or TK, but in the Creative Commons DRM world, that is digital rights management, the discussions focus on fair use, copyright, access to cultural materials, and freedom. This is what we have witnessed in this workshop as well, although it was focused on technology, but I found that the themes were still the same, 12 years on. The two paths rarely cross then. Peter Jassi, whom Rory mentioned yesterday, and Martha Wood-Manzi also came down to Delhi, and they observed that the modern law of copyright was shaped in an interaction between cultural theoreticians and lawmakers, and that the rhetorical structures that emerged from that conversation continued to be consequential. Jassy asked whether it was possible to create alternative discursive framings for policymakers and the public, and explored how the rhetorics of authorship persist in the connection with some of the most progressive practices in today's, just give me a second. Copyright environment, including the movement to open scholarly journals, free software, and the digital commons. According to Jassy, as authorship fragments, texts become hypertext, a serious clash, often of interests, bound by the tensions between sovereignty and exchange, is produced. On one side are those who see it's, let me not expatiate, it's as a serious threat to their commercial interest, and there are traditional notions of individual proprietorship in information, and who perceive the vigorous extension of traditional copyright principles as the solution. On the other side are those who argue that the network environment may become a new cultural commons, which excessive or premature legal control may stifle. A sovereignty discourse is emerging through courtrooms, legislative hearings and debates, the media, and international agreements. Those using this discourse are attempting to locate cyberspace within the boundaries of the sovereign state and copyright law. This is what Jassy had to say. I just quoted him. He defined authorship as a specific locus of a basic contradiction between public access to and public control over imaginative creations. I think Rory discussed this yesterday. All that was in 2005. This is 2017, and the first phase of the NDLI has been launched in India. The battle zone has now shifted. Protection of authors' rights is a weaker rallying cry for stricter control over the internet than the rights of those who control the vectors of information. The controllers of these pathways and the traffic brokers may be publishing conglomerates, the software industry, media houses, including the new liberal or the illiberal nation state, however anomalous the latter may at times seem in the days of the internet. Openness of what? Now here I found there was some, forgive my ignorance of technology, but there was some confusion about what exactly we are talking about. Are we talking about the openness of information, or bits, as Rory defined information, of knowledge? Is knowledge lost in information? Or are we talking about texts? As far as texts are concerned, and I've been a textual scholar all my life, texts are always already mediated. There is no pure text. What we find as a text is either mediated, socially mediated by someone who commissions the text, the editor, the proofreader, the censor, the inquisition, the printing house practice, the playhouse practice, collaborative authorship, and so on and so forth. As textual editor, we try to put together a virgin text, which is ironically always a fully restored one. So what we have in your repository is not so much texts, but what we have is information. And here we cannot do away as easily with the regimen of digital rights management. Just think of Dennis Diderot, who believed that with the coming of printing, copyright would entirely disappear. What really happened was that the copyright law came in 1709, 1710 it was passed. And so this kind of dream was never fully realized. NDLI is an archive of information, not literary output. In the literary output, when the first folio was edited, the first folio of Shakespeare, the editors claimed that it was published from the original copies. Xerox would have, done a double take. The original is precisely what a copy is not supposed to be. But the word copy has in it the root of copia, of fecundity, of reproducibility, and at the same time, what is original is either true, as Hazlitt said, or something that is new. What is new cannot necessarily be a reflection of what is out there. We are always, as in literary outputs, struggling with this kind of paradox. But this is not the case with NDLI. It is an archive of information. Who mediates the archive? And here I would like to end with a thought. My friend Gary Taylor wrote a book called Cultural Selection. And there he had a definition for the archive. And he called it the memory of the future. We try and put in the archive what we would like to think would be the memory of the future. The UNESCO, I believe, is concerned with the future of memory, but the archive is the memory, not of the past, but of the future. Who selects, who puts in what is there in the archive? And here, the crowd has moved in. How do we restrict the crowd? How do we stop the crowd? The question now is no longer that of author's property. Authorial responsibility, authorial accountability, yes. Without that, if you just do away with the idea of the author, then of course there are all kinds of problems, ethical ones especially, not so much legal, but ethical ones. But when we are talking about access, what we really mean is access to information and not to the property rights of the author. So the question is of access and not of authorial rights. We discuss just one more sentence and we are done. And that is, just think of the low compliance, and Kalpanadi is here, who ran the National Library as librarian once upon a time, the low compliance with the depository law in India. The depository law was passed in 1948, amended in 1955-56, and now it has not... 54, right. It's worse than what I thought, Kalpanadi. And in spite of new drafts of revision, for which I had convened a workshop where all stakeholders from India came, nothing has been done so far. Why? Because born digital materials, if you put it into a depository library, people will have access easily. Whereas at the same time, during the same period of time, the Press and Registration of Books Act has been amended 3 times, the last time in 2012. Those who are Indians will know exactly why. Because these are deposited with the Director General of Police of the state. Publishers are more scared of the Director General of Police, not of the National Library. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. That's a great introduction, very erudite introduction to how we want to proceed. I now need the laptop in order to move on from there. You may, if you wish, yes. It's awful how impatient we are now, isn't it? So technology makes things quicker, but you then expect it to be there at that second. Great. So, as I said, this is what I want to run through this morning. We've had an introduction by Professor Chakraborty that I now want to give you, and I apologise if this is teaching you to suck eggs. I want to give you a run through of what our open license is. And then going to have a look at some case studies and the web trends. I'll go through the rest of this agenda. So the first bit is what are open licenses? And this is really just to spell it out, because if I don't, the rest of the talk makes no sense whatsoever to you. So open licenses for me are the Creative Commons licenses. Most of you will have heard about those, but it only applies to these ones. So the public domain mark, the public domain dedication, where you actually decide to put something into the public domain, and the CC BY licenses, CC BY share alike licenses, so Creative Commons BY 4.0, etc., etc., Creative Commons BY share alike. These are the licenses that allow other people to make use of your content for whatever purpose that they decide to make it to use it for. So, for instance, for the material to be usable in education, it should at the very least be Creative Commons by share alike, because then you can really make it work in all sorts of different applications. If you think about, a lot of people want to put Creative Commons by share alike non-commercial on something, and a lot of the platforms that are helping in education are actually commercial platforms. So in theory, they cannot use that material because they are taking on, they're not complying with the license. So we really try very hard to make sure that the open licenses stop at the CC by SA. That means that it is not the CC by ND, i.e. non-derivative, by non-commercial share alike. This might be a bit draconian, but it's the context of this talk, and obviously there is some movement in between these. The other set of licenses that I will talk to you about later, they're not licenses, these are labels, which are trying to cover the instances where it is not an individual putting a license on their work, so a Creative Commons license on their work to share it or to not share it, but these are very much for the cultural heritage institutions, and it's the work of rightstatements.org, which I will come on to in the last part of this talk, where you end up with a set of labels that you can put against your material that says what other people can do with that material, and that's the in a way very much the point of rightstatements.org. So it's where Creative Commons licenses cannot be used, then these licenses that we have come up with together should allow you to tell the user what they can do with that material. So I've got some case studies. I'm going to start with Enno telling us a little bit about the National Library of the Netherlands. The point about this is that it's not me telling you why you should make your material open, but that it is from a peer institution telling you why they have done it in the first place. So Enno.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everybody. I haven't prepared this, so I'll just speak as I do normally. So I hope it will get my message across. For us, the whole copyright issue is, on one side, of course, very complex. We're also a deposit library. We have a lot of material from other institutions for other people, and we really want to take care of that in the right way and abide the laws as they are, of course. That's one point. On the other side, it's also very simple for us. We think that publicly created material created by, financed by the public, should also be public available. That's basically our way of thinking. So all the collections we have, all the material we have that are not restricted, where we have the choice whether to publish it, licensed or not licensed, that material is being available as free as we can. And of course we use the Creative Commons license and other licenses, and that's the area where I certainly won't go, and that's too complex for me. I only do the technology. But I think that's a very crucial part, and I think it's a very, it's a view that fits the library very much, very, very well. And I think I always like to compare it with the things we do in the physical environment. We have our doors open and people can just walk in the library and can use our information. And I think that paradigm should we have, in the end, should be on the internet as well. And we are talking to all kind of partners, networks, publishers, etc., in order to have their content made open in a better usable way. And that's a lot like the ideas that Rory yesterday told us. And it is difficult. And there's of course the question, why would you do that? If you give restricted access, maybe you can make money from it. You can have people pay for it in order to access it. We think in the long run that for the sustainable of the organization, it makes much more sense to open up your collections, to show what you have, to be valuable for the community, and then the community will appreciate you and you have a better sustainable future. And of course you can make in the short run, you can make probably some money if you do it right, but even I was also involved in a project of our Sound and Vision Institute, Beelden voor de Toekomst it was called, that had a really, with the finance, it had a really strong claim to make money with it, and it completely failed because it was too complicated to really make a lot of money with it. And you need to organize so many things, but even in the current way that people consume the digital information, if it's not openly there, then people go somewhere else. And I think if you do open it up, then people find your institute and become interested and start using your collection, because that should be the drive, the reuse of all the valuable information we have. That's basically our ideas.
It's fantastic. And it's true to say that there is also government support for this, isn't there, in the Netherlands?
Yeah, we have a strong support for the government, and we're also for the open access licenses. We're really pushing to have the publishers also go in this direction.
So this is my model of how you should be doing it as libraries. The National Library of the Netherlands. Thank you, Enno. Okay. So my next poster. This is our poster child. So this is my next case study. This comes from the museums world, so not from the libraries. But in 2011, the Rijksmuseum started to put their collections out on the web. They were hugely advantaged by being closed for 7 years or so, where they did the refurbishment of the building. So they actually put all the people that were working in the rooms across the Rijksmuseum, they put them to work in the creating of the metadata and putting the material, and the digitization of the material and putting the material up online. They took, in 2011, a very bold step against their curators who wanted to use a Creative Commons by mark, which is an open license. And the reason the curators wanted to do that is that they wanted the user to attribute the item to the museum. But the museum went for a strategy of fully opening up their content under the public domain mark, as it required, and there were two things that contributed to this decision. Both were around the reputation of the organisation. The first was an argument that we were making to them based actually on the Europeana Public Domain Charter, where if in analogue form the material had been in the public domain, then it should remain so in digital form. And at the time, there was quite a movement, particularly from the Wikipedians, and the likelihood of some backlash from the Wikipedians if this material that had been in the public domain in analogue form wasn't put out in the public domain in digital form. And the second was that they had some very, very poor copies of the paintings on the web. And this actually led us to write a paper called The Problem of the Yellow Milkmaid, which is still actually useful today, and a lot of what I will talk to you is based on this. So the problem with the Yellow Milkmaid was that people were walking into the Rijksmuseum shop and seeing the postcards of the Yellow Milkmaid and say, of the Kitchen Maid, which is the proper title of this painting. And they were saying to the shop owners, but these are really bad reproductions of the picture. I know what this picture looks like. And they had seen these images on the internet, and what they had seen was the image on the right, which is actually quite different in tone to the image on the left. And the Rijksmuseum got very concerned about the images that were out there which belonged to them and their reputation, and they decided they wanted to put out good quality images in an open license so that it was the correct authoritative material that was on the web, not very poor reproductions of it. And this was all about the reputation of the Rijksmuseum. Very interestingly, one of the reasons that the curators gave for not wanting to put the material out was that they would lose money. They would lose visitor numbers to the museum, but they would also lose money in putting all this stuff out as open. Actually, as you can see, for the period of this particular graph, the opposite happened. They didn't lose money, they gained money. And in fact, the amount of money that they were making really didn't justify the cost of having to maintain the person who was going to manage all the licenses and all of the inquiries about it. The reason they made more money was that the material was out there and people were ringing up and saying, I really want to use this in a film, but I need a super high quality image, and they were able then to sell their super high quality images. That the publishers still wanted to go on using this material, and they would ring up and say, okay, but can you deliver it to me in these file types, etc., etc. So they were continuing to make money out of the publishers. So from the point of view of the Rijksmuseum, it really benefited from them. And they were also able to then use their own material for creativity. And if you've not seen this, I really recommend it. It's the Rijks Studio is, you are joking?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, how are we going to manage this? How am I going to manage this? How am I going to manage this? Okay, I'm going to manage this. So this is my Rijksmuseum study. So they then went on and did some creative use of it. So I'm going to skip you through this one. This is another one from the National Library of Sweden. They released their images and they decided to put all of their images up. So 3,000 went in to Wikimedia Commons, and the responses that they got were phenomenal, and the traffic that they now get to their site is also phenomenal. I think this is a very nice quote about the fact that you don't really want your material to be in, everybody just to come into your site. You want your material to be out, and the way to do that is to put it out under an open license. I am, in the interest of time, not going to go into a lot of detail about this, but to tell you that one of the things that we have put an awful lot of effort into is the frameworks that help the libraries, the museums, the archives, and we've done it with the libraries and museums and the archives and the audiovisual collections. The frameworks that tell you what happens when you put your material out at a certain level. So it puts the control back into your hands. The idea here is that we can't all put everything out under open licenses, but if you understand what will happen if you put it out under good quality and open licenses, you can make the decision, and you can also assess the risks related to that. So the publishing framework, there's a video online, you can have a look at it. It's a very short, easy video, and it takes you through what happens with what you are able to get for what you give. So in tier 1, you need a right statement on your material. It needs to have a direct link to the material, and then we can make it work within, for instance, Europeana, but we can't do anything else with it if it's not under an open license. Whereas if you get as far as being able to put it under very good quality and into an open license, it works in education, in the creative industries, in tourism. So the idea behind this is very much a framework that you use to say, okay, this is what I can do with my material, this is what I expect to get for it. And linked to that is the licensing framework of Europeana. Again, all of these don't translate directly to India, but the structure of them probably translates to India. So you are really, it's all open. You're very welcome to use it, including the images, and make it into something that works in this country. The point always is about getting to a level of interoperability. So we want all of this material to be machine readable and to be extractable by users across the world, and that they know what rights are associated with that particular piece of material. So, and that will lead me into the rightstatements.org, which I'll come back to in a minute, and where the National Digital Library of India is involved. You can find a lot of what I have been talking about on pro.europeana.eu. I didn't talk about this yesterday. This is our professional site. It has all of the papers on, all of the background information of how we make the material that comes from the cultural heritage institutions work on the web. So not just in Europeana, it really works across the web, certainly as far as Europe's concerned, and we aim to make that wider. Now, the one thing that I want you to take away from here is that whatever you do, you need to add a rights label to your metadata, because that tells the user what they can do with that material. We're also trying to insist on that more and more with the publishers, and that they use the standardized versions of these, so that again it is machine readable and machine extractable. So what I wanted to do here is to then ask you what you think are the web trends for cultural heritage or libraries in terms of what's happening on the web. So what are the big trends in the internet that you need to be aware of in terms of publishing your material onto the internet? So what's happening in the internet? Anybody? Where are we going? What's happening? Things like if you can't find it on Google, it doesn't exist. Yes? What? Somebody said something? If it's not being indexed by Google, it doesn't exist yet. That actually, you've all got mobile phones. It's a mini computer. That's a huge difference. And in India, it's been a phenomenal transition to the fact you've got a mini computer in your pocket of the size that your laptop was 2 years ago. What it can actually do is phenomenal. What else? Paul?
Yes, kind of rise of social media and interactivity on the web, so being able to share content, create content.
Yeah, so if everybody heard that, rise of social media and activity on the web, the ability to share and create content. Computers don't get any less able to copy. It's really easy to copy. So how are you going to manage that? Enno?
A colleague of mine is always saying that soon computers will read more books than humans.
Computers will read more books than you. Yeah.
Than humans.
Than humans. Oh yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Any other trends?
Voice interaction, not using traditional people.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's changing, and it's changing really fast. What does that mean in terms of the trends also for cultural heritage institutions, for libraries? So things like the costs of digitization are decreasing, but what else is happening as far as libraries are concerned? Less people are walking into libraries. Yeah. What about the cost of preservation and what's happening to that? Is that going up rather than down? What about the fact that if you're not on the web, you don't exist because they're not walking into libraries in the first place? That there is an increase of use of material in its digital form, that there is a huge demand from education of the material that's out there, but they want it in that form. These are some of them. These are some of the major trends. So what are the negative effects of putting your material out onto the web in a very open form? And there are some, and these you really need to consider. So while I'm advocating open, I really think you need to take this stuff on board before you do anything. So these are the things that people came up with when we asked the question across Europe. So it's things like loss of quality of the material, loss of brand value. Well, the Rijksmuseum has actually proven the opposite of that, and I can give you many more case studies of it. The loss of potential income. This is always something that bring up. Most of the time it isn't. Yeah.
Bill, nobody's mentioned moral rights.
Moral rights, true.
And that's one of the issues here, isn't it? That you're posting your stuff out there, but you're expecting it to be used in the same way. But people are not necessarily doing that with content.
Yeah.
You find it crops up in some other way, entirely different to your perception of it.
Yeah.
And sometimes juxtaposed with things that you wouldn't want it next to.
That's true. Yes, and that's where that was. I thought that was on here. Unwanted spillover effects. That's that. And the loss of control is also part of it. So these, the moral rights is also part of this whole discussion. The fact that you might lose customers, but maybe you're losing them anyway because they're not walking through the doors. There's somebody up there. Oh no. So these are the things that we came up with that were very much about the potential losses. But there are also some potential. Sorry, did you want to take a poster of that one? There are also some really potential benefits to doing this, and this was the opposite side of the equation. So the positive effects of putting your material out under open licenses were these. So these are you have a public mission as an organisation, that you actually get desired spillover effects. That's how linked open data works. How do you make the connections between things, the semantic connections between things? It increases your discoverability. It generates new customers. One of the other side effects of the Rights Museum has been that all the digitisation companies are lining up to digitise their material because they want to be associated with that brand, which is, I think, something that is very enormous. So there are a lot of benefits to doing it. The European results to this were, these were the three that people thought were most important. These were the three that they thought were, and that they thought this was going to shift over time. So these were the negatives, these were the positives, and they thought they were going to shift this over time. I do need to crave 2 minutes extra to do the right statements bit. I'm sorry that this is slightly chaotic, but I hope you've got the idea out about the reason for open licenses. The one thing I just want to cover, and that was the reason for my talk in the first place here, is around rights statements. So together with the Digital Public Library of America, we realised that Creative Commons were not going to cover all the instances that cultural heritage institutions had in terms of being able to label their data. So there was a project we went into together in order to make this happen, and the result of that was that we ended up with rightstatements.org, which you can go and have a look at. And it's to establish the vocabulary that every organisation can use to talk to their audience about copyright and the related rights. And that fundamentally everyone should know how to legally engage with their cultural heritage. So it's those two aspects that we were trying to cover in the rights statements. This is the site. It's slightly out of date. We need to update it and put all the logos on, including the National Digital Library of India that has joined the consortium. That was the people that you saw in the first slide. And it's a consortium that is being run by the consortium. It's not owned by Europeana or by the DPLA. It is owned by everybody who joins that consortium and makes it happen. They are categorized into 3 different types of rights statements. I am not going to go through them. You can do this yourselves. But they go from the rights statements for in-copyright objects to the rights statements for objects that are not in copyright, to other rights statements, which tend to cover things like the moral rights, or where they know that it's in copyright but they will permit, for instance, educational use, which is quite important for quite a lot of the libraries, actually. Governance structure I'm not going to go into really, other than to say that we are a steering group, but we have 2 working groups. One, to go on adding or improving the statements themselves, and the other one is a technical working group to make sure that they continue to be available in a machine-readable way. So all of this is available for you to extract and incorporate into your own material. Rightstatements.org is what I'm going to leave you with. It was 3 minutes. Thank you.
I'll give you some. Thank you so much, Jill. I'm afraid, and I'm sorry, we may not have a proper Q&A session. After all, the session was very interactive anyway. So if you have any specific questions, I would suggest that you can ask them offline. In the meantime, I'd like to, on behalf of the organizing committee, to give you a little token for yours. Yes, please.
Always difficult here, isn't it? We need to reorganise the days.
Yes.
Now, thank you very much. Thank you.
So, can Professor Chakraborty and Enno also come for the token, please? A memento. Oh,
Who's going to give you that?
I don't know. Probably somebody. Oh, no?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.